Hello, my name is Elizabeth Guidry. Welcome to the Think JSOU series presented by the Office of Strategic Engagement at the Joint Special Operations University. We're happy to welcome our distinguished speaker today. This video is unclassed and will be recorded and posted to the JSOU network. Please keep in mind that the views and opinions of the speakers are their own and may not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, and policies of the United States government, the United States Department of Defense, the United States Special Operations Command, or the Joint Special Operations University. If you have any questions after the video, please contact us at thinkjsou@jsou.edu.
Greetings, everyone. The title of this Think JSOU is Timor-Leste, Peace, Reconciliation, and Democracy in an Era of Growing Conflict and Climate Change. Let me first take a few minutes to introduce Dr. Saldanha to you. He's the founder and president of Joao Saldanha University, starting in 2016 to present in the capital city of Dili. Its vision is to create and disseminate knowledge through creativity, inquiry, and bring the benefits to the community. Its mission to bring the tradition of innovation, entrepreneurship, and problem solving. Its motto, the truth will set you free. It's a Southeast global university. Its programs of study include development studies, economics, business, applied science, and engineering. It has a school of law and more recently a school of medicine. Dr. Saldanha got his BA in economics at Satya Wacana Christian University in Indonesia. He has a master's in international management from the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. He received a graduate program certificate in political economy and government at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And he obtained his PhD in international economic affairs with a minor in comparative politics at the School of Global Policy and Strategy at the University of California at San Diego. He was a senior management advisor for the Ministry of Finance for policy analysis and research in helping the country at a pivotal time develop its current strategic development plan, 2011 to 2030. He was the founding executive director for the Timor Institute of Development Studies at a time both before and after independence, at a critical time in the country's history that we will soon hear about. For the Timor Institute of Development Studies, he researched conflict resolution and public policy research and examined the relationships among Timorese leadership, government, and non-government organizations. He's been an advisor to the President's Advisory Council, to the President of the United Nations Transition Authority, to the World Bank, and to other prominent development partners. He's been a fellow at the Australian National University, at Oxford, at Charles Darwin University, and also at Harvard. He's convened many conferences. He speaks at least 5 languages, and he's written 5 books, including East Timor Development Challenges for the World's Newest Nation back in 2001. Well, that's certainly a mouthful. It does not even do Dr. Saldanha's incredible history a full justice. But we are fortunate to catch Dr. Saldanha on the coattails of a presentation he gave at Harvard on Timor-Leste, or East Timor, and its bid to join the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. The goal of this interview is to gain perspective about the following 2 overarching questions. 1, how can the US government and its partners better understand Timor-Leste's success in navigating from 25 years of violent conflict through post-conflict to a stable and peaceful democracy in the past 25 years? 2, for the next 25 years, what threats and opportunities does he see as one of Timor-Leste's most prominent thought leaders with climate change affecting the island's economy and its security? Dr. Saldanha, before we begin, I would like to ask if you would like to add any opening remarks and/or if you would like to summarize the essence of your presentation to Harvard, as it would be a great preface to the questions I would like to ask you.
Yes, Professor Peter Cloutier, it was an honor to catch up again. Recognize that we had in the past supposed to be talking more on several issues, but the time difference made a lot of change. But I'm glad that today we can reconvene together, although via Zoom, to discuss some issues that are concerned with Timor-Leste and also in this relationship with the United States of America. Before going into the substance, just to recap briefly again about the university. It has 4 programs that are active. It's a School of Economics and Business, a School of Language Studies, a School of Applied Science and Engineering, and a School of Architecture and Urban Planning. Aside from that, we have the foundation program, 0 year as we call it in Timor-Leste, and we're the only one doing that. And also general studies program that done in the first year before they move into schools of their choice, but also dependent on the math performance of the students. Now, on the points that I made at Harvard, basically there were 3 points. Number 1 is that Timor-Leste have come a long way, started from scratch in building democracy that is vibrant right now. And that is because of the support of international community, including the US, and underpinned by the idea that peace and reconciliation must be in place. And that is all our leadership are committed, leadership across the political spectrum are committed to building peace and reconciliation. And I think that underpinned the whole process of nation building and democracy, the vibrant democracy that now we have. On the second point is that we're looking to the future, and Timor-Leste cannot on its own develop as such, given its limited resources, given its limited capacity, and therefore we like to be part of the ASEAN. However, being part of ASEAN, of course, Timor-Leste faces a lot of challenges, of course, to be part of the group. But at the same time, there are opportunities for Timor-Leste to be part of this very big, wide, and diverse grouping with more than 600 million people, a GDP of $3.5 trillion in one hand, but also on the other hand, for Timor-Leste to be part of member of ASEAN, which is in principle ASEAN already agreed, and we do have observer status right now, also an opportunity as a test for ASEAN capability to manage for the diversity. That's an idea is that it's already diverse, but adding Timor-Leste will be adding the diversity, and it could be an opportunity for ASEAN as well to manage to show that capability. In addition, but Timor-Leste also can bring some good experiences on the table. So it's the traffic is not only one way, but it's going to be a two-way. We can share, we can speak, or Timor-Leste can speak eloquently about how to build a vibrant democracy in Southeast Asia. We do have several nations in the member that our democracy is very vibrant. But I believe that Timor-Leste's experience, it's a typical Timor-Leste that may be shared with other members of ASEAN. Underpinned, the democracy, the vibrant democracy is underpinned by peace and reconciliation. So that This is one of the main points. The dynamic relationship, being part of ASEAN, the second point that I want to bring up is that Timor-Leste can bring to the table about its being part of the Portuguese-speaking countries, as well as the small G7 post-conflict countries, in which can help enhance the international standing of ASEAN. We do aware that each country, each member of ASEAN has its own bilateral relationship, but by having Timor-Leste playing a bridge between these two groupings with ASEAN will also help in the future, especially in terms of balancing the relationship between US and West Europe in one hand and China on the other hand. So ASEAN can play a very constructive role in terms of helping to promote peace, stability, and prosperity in the region by having good relations with both. And in the end, we hope that Timor-Leste can play quite a good role by being member of ASEAN. That summarizes it's a little bit long, but summarize what I spoke. Supposed to be 5 minutes.
Fantastic, Dr. Saldanha. Timor-Leste has an incredible peace and reconciliation history. It has uniquely transitioned from conflict and post-conflict scenarios to a successful period of stability and reconstruction. And now the country is starting its third decade since independence, beginning of its third decade since independence, with multiple iterations of free and fair elections. You have established and reestablished critical infrastructure and improved social services for most of the country. And, this is remarkably a less known parable of success for a world that is seeing greater conflict, stalled or reversing stabilization, and even democratic backsliding in some places. So it's an incredible asset that you bring to the world, not just ASEAN. So let me stop there. I do have a few questions to ask that I think segue from your Harvard presentation. And to some extent, they would just be adding on to, I think, things that you've already said. But for my first question, let's return to some of the points you highlighted at Harvard. Just in a few examples, perhaps, what investments has Timor-Leste made to achieve its stable democracy?
It's really a commitment by the leadership of Timor-Leste with encouragement from the international community. So in building the state, so that's the background. And Timor-Leste takes seriously the issue of peace and conflict resolution after the devastation or the destruction in 1999. And also the second point is really want to have a good relationship with its neighbor, especially with Indonesia, who occupied Timor-Leste in 24 years. Whatever it happened in the past. Now, the good thing is that the Timorese, the leadership, and the younger generation leaders that are coming on, also would like to see the future, moving forward instead of looking back all the time to what happened in the past. In the past is a good reminder for us, but we need to move forward. And to move forward, how? Moving forward to develop the country underpinned by within a democratic system in which a development that is inclusive, a development that is based on fair and social justice. And that's what we have been doing over the last 20 years. Of course, we would like to move a bit faster, but given the history over the long period, if we stretch back to the 500 years ago, starting from the Portuguese, a brief Japanese occupation, then Indonesia, it's already on a path of no return, I will say. And that democracy has survived with several tests. That's the thing that I actually highlight also at the Harvard presentation, that it survived with several tests. We can discuss about how, but democracy is there to stay, and we all want to make sure that peace, democracy, and stability, that moving forward, it has to be within a democratic Timor-Leste and to create a prosperous Timor-Leste. I hope I respond to your question.
Very much, Dr. Saldanha. So much that we can take away from that answer. The cultural diversity that exists in Timor-Leste is an important factor. The visuals that I took away, just the intergenerational aspect of it, that you were able to connect through multiple generations. That's a strong visual for us in the United States to hear that. I think very much a key to success. And I know you personally had a lot to do with women's inclusion in that process in the 2000s, in leadership with the United Nations on that front. So these things, it gets talked a lot about, but you all really did it. And so this incredible stuff. My second question, just in a few answers, or what comes to mind, how did external partners support these investments? You mentioned it some, but if there are any specific examples you can think of.
Well, it's very much so. I think briefly I was saying this vibrant democracy is because Timorese is committed to peace and reconciliation, but also with a very strong support by the international community in terms of through the UN moved in at several stages. If we look into the engagement of the international community, I see it, and this is also again going to the presentation at Harvard. I see there are 4 elements on how the United Nations helped right from the beginning. It helped through the United Nations, of course, with the UN 5, United States, UK, France, China, Russia, having this commitment to support or to bring the peace and stability in Timor-Leste, asked Australia to come in. So that's the first to establish order in Timor-Leste, and then look after the IDPs, to start to promote stability first in the country. And then you enter several missions on time for us to go through that period. But in the end, there was also quite a clear exit strategy by the United Nations that we read as part of the international community. So going first to stabilize the security in Timor-Leste, and based on that, begin to address, to put up the basics of a democratic country in Timor-Leste. Then I will call it help Timor-Leste to start delivering, to draft the constitution. That's a part of the process. Delivering some basic services to the country, establishing the public administration, and then writing constitution, bringing in the guerrilla force or the Valentil in Timor-Leste into a state army that moves towards a more modern, traditional army, TAC, or fully under the civilian control. That's also the international community helped very much, and seems to me that that point of view, that the armed forces and police under the civilian control is pretty much in play during the last 2 decades. And I hope that it's going to be strengthened in the future, and also beginning to deliver some basic services to the population with the international support. So many so that I cannot list one by one, but it's been very good. It's been sometimes that's a joint project, we can call it a joint project that created the vibrant democracy in Timor-Leste, is Timorese, with the partnership with the international community that takes different forms.
Well, great, Dr. Saldanha. I mean, it's some obvious takeaways from me, having spent most of my career overseas. You know, we from the external partner standpoint, I mean, everybody's sort of jumping to get in the ring because they want to add to the solution set. But you know, the entrance to those entrance portals, those exit portals that you mentioned, those can be just as important. And so we oftentimes don't get those parts right, where we may get some of the sort of the middle part right. So that was a big takeaway. I mean, the other thing that I think that you mentioned, under civilian control, I mean, the resistance efforts were incredible. But then to put that under an organized structure, that really was a significant part of the history, and a part that has been quite difficult in other places. So that's why I wanted to particularly reference that. Dr. Saldanha, I mean, just a couple more questions in this sort of under that first question, that first overarching question. What investments were not made by either Timor-Leste or external partners? And I mean that could actually go both ways. Those could be not made, which actually helped, or not made that might have slowed things down. So your discretion on how you'd like to give us a few examples there, please.
Let me just step back by qualifying some of my statements that have been made. It's doing this, having this vibrant democracy, and starting to address the benefit to the population. That's not without flaws. There are many that we can also discuss that in a separate occasion. But it's also good that the Harvard invitation gave me some time to reflect. And if you look at the overall, the picture that came out is quite decent, robust in terms of state building. And as you're right, in terms of exit strategy, it was subject to the test several times, but the end it was delivered by the international community. So that was quite good. In terms of what Timorese did, or what the international community didn't do, or Timorese didn't do, I think at this point in time, both sides covered the basics of getting it right. After 20 years, of course, people will say, yes, it's a democracy, but it's elite. Some elites are, yes, it's democracy, it's moving forward, but who are the benefits? Who have been benefited by the whole process of development, reconstruction in Timor-Leste? Especially we go down to the different groups within the country. Of course, there are issues that we have to work and we have to work hard. But I believe that what was done pretty much covered, given the situation that Timor-Leste faced. Of course, I want to see faster economic growth. I want to see we can compete right there, participate more in the international community, but you just have to move one step at a time and get it right and get it stable so that it can provide the basis for the next step that is stronger and bigger and faster. I will say that way. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Saldanha. I'm not going to respond too much to that, but only to say that it's 2 points, I guess I should say. The JSOU president mentions this a lot. It's not his own saying, but he uses it quite a bit. You know, there's a difference between doing things right and doing the right things. And so, you know, right. What I heard you say sort of at the onset of your answer was getting it right, and you know, that seemed to have worked. And then I think the second thing that the USAID administrator, Samantha Power, mentions a lot is, you know, the idea of localization. And, you know, that is another one where, you know, everyone says that, but it's more difficult to do it. And it worked in Timor-Leste. It didn't work perfectly, obviously, but it did.
There are areas that needs to be improved, of course, but
right.
Overall work. Yes,
but right. But Timor-Leste's leadership there in those critical transition years really had the reins and had control and really worked through its entire population to really galvanize that stability. So and that was sort of the overarching visual, I would say. All right, Dr. Saldanha. The last question I wanted to ask in this set was, how has Timor-Leste's progress shaped your current and future economic projections? You did talk about this a lot at Harvard, so
yes. Yeah, I look at it. It's a robust democracy, and we hope to strengthen it forward for the next. If we took a lot of time to ensure that democracy works and a lot of attention going into that direction, with less on the economic and infrastructure development, this is the time for the next 20, 30 years or so to start shifting to that direction. Of course, the way you do it, it's quite challenging, and then no one knows what's happening. Is going to happen in the next several years, let alone 5, 10, or several decades onwards. But at least I can see Timor-Leste's economy. It has a nature of a low-base economy that you just start to. I don't know how to say it in English properly, but if you start something, you can see right away the results and can be visible. The results are. So the low basis economy is a good one for us so that we can move faster. It implies that the country can grow at the minimum a double-digit growth. If we get it right, we do it properly, we know how addressing the key sectors, key potential sectors of the economy, and being part of ASEAN is one of those. But also we experienced at the time that I call it as the Belle Epoque, the golden epoch when Timor-Leste grew by 10% on average. That was 2008 to 2012. And after that, we get a little bit diverse or a little bit, we didn't quite refocus to continue on that path of high growth. But it can be repeated for the coming years and decades. And that's why I'm quite confident. And Timor is also quite, in terms of human resources, more young Timorese, well educated, locally, but also internationally, coming to US, going to Australia, going to Europe, going to China, going to Japan. I haven't seen any going to Russia, but I think a lot of them going to ASEAN countries. So I think that bulk of the population will introduce it to the main concepts of development and within in a democratic setting. So the high growth also, some know that internationally there are already countries that are doing that by learning the history, very, very recent history. So I hope that we can build on that, what we have, to start the next phase based on the 2 decades of development, democracy, economic development, infrastructure development, a relationship with other countries. I believe that Timor-Leste can move fast, can be a country that can achieve a high income status by 2045 or 2050. And by building on what we have done so far, we pull off the democracy side and we want to keep that to stay onwards. Now is economic development, so that can bring the benefits as soon as possible, as wide as possible to the population of Timor-Leste by promoting domestic cooperation as well as international cooperation, as we done already in the last 20 years.
Great, Dr. Saldanha. I mean, it's fantastic, to be able to talk to someone with your experience, but also be the president of a university. So, you're able to project in the future, but also share and build that future with students that are now in the setting where Timor-Leste is currently and can get to that growth that you're talking about. Dr. Saldanha, I want to move to the second sort of set of questions. These ones dealing more with that future projection. What are some of the concerns you have for climate change on that economic projection for Timor-Leste?
This, I have to honestly admit, this is not my strength. And I also try now in the last couple months, I have given some thoughts about it, but what that I'm giving to you is not a well thought on somebody who has experience in dealing with climate change as such. So whatever I am saying it's my impressions on the climate change. I'm saying it's not very authoritative points, but hey, I need to respond to your question anyway. Yeah. So one of the challenges that Timor-Leste faces economically is that we've been quantifying the growth, economic development, infrastructure development, numbers of students, number of doctors, patients, etc. But what we missed in our national accounts, and this could be not only Timor-Leste, but can be globally, that we didn't incorporate the damages, the loss that were inflicted by the climate change in terms of the roads that have been wiped out, the buildings that have been torn down, the schools that no longer exist. And we didn't quantify that properly, especially in Timor-Leste's case. If we put that into account, maybe the economic development of Timor-Leste, or maybe countries that experience that. So far, we only have this, post-conflict in the world, Timor-Leste, or the war-torn countries experienced a contraction in economic growth, this number, this much. But we didn't see after water washed away houses, after schools not being there, interrupted with schools, interrupted with medical services, etc. We didn't quantify it into our economic growth projections, or our economic growth accounting as we know it in economics. So for Timor-Leste, this is very, very visible in terms of, so we have, I think, to moving forward, we need really, we need to incorporate the damages created by or inflicted by climate change in the local economy. In the local economy, it means that quantifying the numbers and linking and then estimating how many, in terms of growth, what was the contraction inflicted by the natural disaster and climate change.
That's great, Dr. Saldanha. We are hearing of climate change effects almost daily, I would say, in the news here in the United States. And yet during the same news hour, we see economic projections and so forth seem to relate more to, things like inflation and post-COVID related things, not necessarily looking 10 to 15 years out. And what can we look at economically as a result of more cyclones or hurricanes or floodings, yes, or droughts? We only have sort of the image of those things and the intensity of those things, but not necessarily economic impact. So that's a great perspective. My second question I wanted to ask is, perhaps running with that glass half empty or more pessimistic view that if climate does impact those economic growth projections that you and the country has, without taking into consideration what sort of damaging effects have taken place, what sort of conflict scenarios could be possible as a result in did you say 2045 or 2050? If these effects are as bad or worse as the worst case projections are?
Well, I mean, we always, when we're talking about economics, I possibly am one of those in the group of thinking, bringing in more positive outlook so that we can move forward. Of course, a lot of having 2045 or having 2050, there are a lot of things that we need to address before getting a growth on its own, moving on its own forward. As you mentioned, that the climate change is one, and we need to develop the capacity to be able to understand properly what are the damages, or what are the potentials that the climate provides to us. And I think that that angle, we, as I said beforehand, were not incorporated in our views, in our economic policies, and in our economic projections for the future. So if there is any joint cooperation for the coming years, I think the climate change aspect, the damage that inflicted by climate change will need to be incorporated and need to be worked together with the international community. So I think if in the past 20 years or so, a very good partnership with the international community in terms of creating a vibrant democracy with economics also moving ahead, but slowly. But democracy really is there. For the coming 20 years or so, or 30 years or so, I think working together to also pull off, in that sense, contributing to high economic growth by taking into account, by factoring the climate change effects. And that could be what that can drag the country moving forward, and what are the potentials out there that we can use to make the country leap forward as fast as possible. And my take is that I want to see the country grow at the double-digit rates for the coming 25, 30 years. If some of the countries in Southeast Asia and East Asia can do that, I think Timor-Leste can also do that. But within the settings of democracy and justice, that can also be benefit other countries in the region or in the world. Yeah.
Dr. Saldanha, I think that is a key point, an understated point almost. I mean, ASEAN countries are very much a association of violence, like Timor-Leste, and
Yes.
I think we in the United States, we are we have fairly fixed weather patterns, 4 seasons, that sort of thing. Closer to the equator in Southeast Asia, wet seasons, dry seasons are more prevalent. You know, what happens when they're extended or shortened? I mean, not so good on a drought, not so good when it's prolonged rain. And so, you know, these things can create far more acute situations than a lot of the United States is accustomed to. So therefore, it becomes, I think, harder, more difficult to get that perspective. But like you said, I mean, being a part of ASEAN allows you to not necessarily, as we were talking about in the early days of Timor's independence and what got that peace and reconciliation correct. That actually may be the best cards you have to play at that ASEAN table, not necessarily a technological innovation or something of that matter, which is what we often tend to think of first, is what is the innovation, and not necessarily the how or the practice. Okay, well, my last question, and that is perhaps switching it around to the glass half full, or a more optimistic perspective. It's a more difficult one perhaps as well, but what sort of opportunities are there going forward, knowing that there are going to be climate change impacts around the globe? What could be sort of the glass half full or the optimistic side from your perspective about Timor-Leste?
Let me also step back a little bit on ASEAN. I mean, if you look into ASEAN, it's 600 million people, and it could be growing in the next decade or so. That could have hit 700, 800. It could be a $1 billion people in that archipelagic region. Big countries in the world, as we see, United States, Europe, or China, India, it's all in the land side development. ASEAN could provide another model of development that is an archipelagic in nature, that combines the potentials of land and sea for the development of the whole region. Of course, there are always challenges out there. But for Timor-Leste, inserting ourselves within ASEAN, as you rightly pointed out, and not so much of bringing in science and technology, because that's we're saving on the other end, but sharing the experience of eloquently on building peace, reconciliation, vibrant democracy. That's why we can share a lot on those areas. So the idea is, if we can grow, we hope that Timor-Leste can grow, can help the region, at least provide the experience because you have very small country with very small population, very small economy. Within an economy that big, maybe your impacts are very limited. It will be maybe the border areas, Eastern Indonesia, probably, and but the soft side of it will be quite big in terms of peace building, reconciliation, and democracy. So we would like to see Timor-Leste that fully takes into account the dangers of the climate change, but in one hand, but also take into account the opportunities that are offered by the climate change for growth, for high growth for the coming 20, 25, 20, 30 years towards the future. I also like to highlight that Timor-Leste is having elections next month. 21st May of 2023. The leadership that brought Timor-Leste into independence and also nurtured the whole process of democracy up so far, which quite good. And probably because of their ages, for the next 5 years, they will be around. And I hope that they can stay a bit more, but it works against the age. I mean, it's something that you cannot reverse. But we hope that democracy sustain it, but then we can grow a bit faster. It's the whole process of education, of moving from peace building to economic development. That requires a new set of thinking, a new set of framework that must be applied a wide range of to different landscapes within the country so that we can all be in the same page moving forward. And that's one of the challenges that we need to face. But once you get in already to democracy brings its own dynamics, right? So, the democracy say, okay, I want to be elected in the next 5 years. I don't care whatever in the next 10 years or 20, 30 years. That's another different thing. And that's the real challenges that we're facing. And I hope that somehow, again, with the youngsters who come in, can have that longer perspective, because acting will be working towards that direction in a longer way, but also with our partners, the international community. And I've seen that the US is very committed to support Australia, even Indonesia, who is the main sponsor of Timor-Leste, being member of ASEAN, which is the reflection of how peace and reconciliation work in both countries. So we may be able to pull it off. And I want to say this publicly right now. We want to overtake Singapore. Singapore probably already exhausted its capability of the last 30, 40 years. I sense Timor-Leste is just the beginning, and it has its own potential that can be built upon.
Fantastic answer, Dr. Saldanha. And, I think there are certainly economic principles that weigh in favor of big countries and big economies and a big domestic base. But, as I hear President Wilson at JSOU mention frequently, innovator's dilemma, which I think actually came from a Harvard professor, that it's once you get set in your ways, it's actually hard to figure out the innovations for such a big operating thing. So you get set in your ways, you do the things that you've gotten good at doing, but then it's hard to actually do the new things
Exactly.
at the same time. And so, you have a place where, where Timor-Leste, a smaller environment, doesn't have such a large economy, but is able to be more nimble and responsive and adaptive. Can actually take innovation and scale it actually more easily than a larger place. And I like the reference to Singapore. I mean, that's another island country that has clearly done that well.
Very well, yeah.
Yeah. So
But
So Doc-
I also, if I may just interject briefly, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, you have debates in the US about this US, China, but I believe what I understand from the US, learning a bit of history, what the US contraction and revival, et cetera, there is always the power of innovation that carries on. The tax in the mid-90s made the country moving forward very strong. And therefore, I mean, for a small countries like Timor-Leste, if we can find our path to be able to understand the environment around and always renew it itself in terms of, all right, we're settled with good things that we have done for a certain period, but renewing it, moving to the next phase, like moving countries, advanced countries, moving from industrial revolution to, and then up to technological revolution or digital economy. I think Timor-Leste needs to sit for food very strongly right now so that it can tap into these potentials in the future. But we have to create it. I think there is no way that you think things may happen automatically. But I think it has to be crafted. It has to be think through, and it has to be strategized at the country level. And this is going to be very difficult. A big, not very difficult, but a big challenge that small countries, post-conflict countries like us, face for the next decades or so. But looking at Singapore, looking at the big countries, one of the back in 2000 when we had this book that you mentioned at the beginning, Development Challenge for the newest nation, is that a latecomer. So Timor will be always a latecomer. And that is not a downside, but actually it's a plus side for us to learn and to avoid the mistakes done by those who already advanced at the beginning.
Fantastic, Dr. Saldanha. And I know we're coming up on an hour mark here, so it's a good time to finish. I want to just add to that by just saying the USAID Assistant Administrator Michael Schiffer was just speaking with CSIS just last week, actually, and just so many great things that he mentioned. But one thing in particular that just dovetails nicely with what you said. He said, we need to light our own candle. And he said, I just want to emphasize with partners in the Pacific region and in the Pacific way, he deliberately said. And I think that, when it comes to the innovations of the future, that's the partner that the United States wants to see ourselves as. And so, I think many of us, we look forward to partnering more with Timor-Leste and with ASEAN and with others in the Pacific region. So, Dr. Saldanha, it's been a fantastic interview. Your perspectives are so insightful, and to hear this history as well as this projection will mean a lot for the people that have the opportunity to hear this. I just want to ask you: is there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yes. Thank you very much for the discussion so far. And I think since we discussed it quite in length, I do see that we have covered most of the points, and I hope that they are very useful. The thing is that what we have covered, pretty much we covered the discussion for this time, and I would like to use this opportunity to say I really appreciate that we have this conversation. It's not only for JSOU and Peter or USAID to think, but it's also for me as a person, and then with the university and some reasons we also useful for the country. when people come by, and then in our exchanges that can be relayed to as many as possible. So let's keep discussion in the coming years and check what is in the ground, progress is in the ground. And I hope that Peter and your institutions now is with JSOU and maybe with others in the coming periods or coming years, we continue to have conversations like this to see how we have done this joint project has evolved and what the results in the coming years show.
Fantastic, Dr. Saldanha. From one university to another, best of luck in that near future. We look forward to working with you more, and for Timor-Leste strategic development plan, we hope that those goals are fulfilled in 2030, and that those longer term objectives that you mentioned are satisfied despite some of these global challenges that we have forthcoming. So thank you very much for your time, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to have this conversation.